everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 4 of Pluto. We're halfway through the series, which is so wild that we only have a month left, right? But there's been so much going on in this series so far. It has been a very dense 3 episodes that we've watched so far, and I'm really, really excited by it. And to see, so far theories have come in and out. I was convinced that Adam was secretly the murderer. I think it's just because of the horns, the way his hair like flipped up into the horns, like the Astro Boy thing. I was convinced that that was a signal or a sign that he was related to the murders, but no. Now, could he be related somewhat to Pluto? Maybe, we don't know yet, right? We have Pluto, we have Astro Boy, and we have Iran. They all seem very like interstellar, so in their nomenclature, so maybe there's a connection there. We'll have to see. And specifically, it's weird to me that Abdullah literally wants Adam to be targeted. Now, I get that this is somewhat of an adaptation of Astro Boy, so of course Adam's going to be targeted because Astro Boy. But I find it interesting that of all of the 7, that's the next one to be targeted is Adam, and not Hercules, not Epsilon, not Gesick. It's literally Adam. So maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see. As far as notes goes, Neil Charian at 257 talked about how Urasawa wrote Pluto in 2003. So it's been 21 years since Pluto was written, which is really crazy cool. But apparently Urasawa wrote this as a critique of the U.S. invasion to Iraq, which we're not going to get into politics, but if Urasawa is critiquing that decision, I'm definitely on board with Urasawa critiquing that decision, and that's all I'll say on the matter. So I do definitely understand now, especially with the instances we've seen of Hercules and Brando and Mont Blanc in the desert, those scenes and some of the stuff talking about Persia and talking about relations. Yeah, there's a lot of comparisons there, and I kind of appreciate that Urasawa is taking a note in history and being like, let's inspire this and talk about it. And it brings up a lot of interesting critiques, so I'm all for that. So thank you, Neil Charian, for pointing that out. Brian Settles, 88, talked about how Tetsuka was the author of Astro Boy, and it was designed more for children. So even with topics that were more broad to deliver to a child audience, it still could have some pretty interesting themes. Yeah, I feel like modern children's entertainment, because I have a lot of friends with kids, so I see some of the kids' entertainment. A lot of it is, I don't want to say the word dumbed down, but a lot of it's very cutesy and stuff. When I was growing up, a lot of the kids' entertainment was like hardcore, gripping, dark, or focused on some major issues. Like there was an episode of Sesame Street I remember watching as a kid where someone died, and I was like, oh my gosh, and teaching kids how to handle grief. And I feel like some entertainment now wants to shy away from that and just be stupid. And I'm like, no, kids are smart. Kids process things. They may not understand the societal context of things that you're teaching them, but they get it, and they know when something's weird and when something's not weird. So I feel like we need to give kids more credit, but also I like this idea of Tetsuka framing these broad themes to appeal to a younger audience, and then Urasawa kind of takes their own spin on it. I was telling Brian Settles, I took a children's lit class when I was in college. It was really fascinating. So a lot of the things we were directly talking about, like older children to adolescent lit, but it was still kind of the same concepts of presenting narratives and things like that. So I like that about this story. I like that Urasawa is taking their own twist, making it a little bit more adult with a story that's meant for a younger audience. That's pretty cool. And then HBanana7 talks about Pluto's voice, or in the fake body that they used, is the same voice actor as Urahara from Bleach. And I was like, that's where I know that voice from. I swear I watched so much Bleach as a kid. I was like, where have I heard this voice? It's Urasawa. So or it's Urahara. There we go. So I really appreciated those comments. Thank you all so much for giving those. I'm really enjoying Pluto. It's such a weird thing that we're halfway through a series by the same mangaka that I spent literally we would have been at episode 37 when we were halfway through Monster. So it's so weird that we're now halfway through Pluto and it's only been 3 episodes and now we're on the 4th. Bizarre, right? But I really, really like this series, and it's been fun to kind of dive into the mystery and see where my theories go, if I'm right or wrong, and to see where they're developing. Because it's no fun if you can predict the whole show, Right? Some of those reactors that predict things like on the first go, that's cool and all, but then it's like, you know what's going to happen. So where's the fun and excitement and mystery? You're just like, oh yeah, I predicted that. Like, that's not me. No, I can't do that. So I'm enjoying the twists and turns that Pluto is giving us. I hope you all are as well. So we're going to dive right in and not waste any more time and start Pluto episode 4. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. This episode was a lot. There's so much going on in this series, and it's a lot of information each episode at once, and that is the downside of when you're watching like multiple hour-long episodes, because especially in a series like this, it's not like just a movie or something where you're like, oh, we're just gonna take our time and enjoy the ride. No, there's like stuff happening, and so I even forgot that that Adolf's whole MO is because he believes that Gesic's responsible for his brother's death. There is so much happening in this episode that was kind of insane, and there's a lot going on. It's just like the show was like, oh hey, remember back in episode 1 where it was just about Duncan and North number 2? And you're like, we spent half the episode with that storyline, but it could possibly have a tie-in to Dr. Tenma. I was like, oh, Urasawa, you couldn't resist. You couldn't resist. Although this Dr. Tenma is probably a descendant of the Tenma from Monster. I'm going to say that this Dr. Tenma is a long-time descendant of our original Dr. Tenma. He seems a little bit more sinister too about it too. He wants robots to have emotions and they'd be the ultimate killing machine. That's terrifying. Yeah, he brings up some really good points, being like, you want robots to be like humanity, but they're weapons of mass destruction and not the metaphorical kind. You sure you want that? Okay. And then I'm in complete denial about Adam. I am in complete denial about Adam, because as soon as Iran says that he's dead, we don't see Iran, we don't see Adam, we see none of them. I'm in denial. I guess, like, Mont Blanc, we saw him, like, blown up. We saw him explode. He was clearly dead. North number 2, we got the impression that he crashed and burned. We saw that. Brando, we saw him fizzling out and sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Those 3 make sense. But Adam, we just see his body there, and he's out, but I'm like, I guess I'm just in denial. So for now, let's just make a run through, right? So we have Mont Blanc. We have them. They are out. We have North number 2. And they are out. We have Brando. They are out. We have Adam. Supposedly they are out, but I'm putting question marks because this is an adaptation of Astro Boy, so I feel like maybe that is kind of spoilery in itself, because it's like, you're going to kill off the main character from Astro Boy? Really? So I'm in denial about it. I'm like, we're halfway through the series. Do I think that they would have killed off a character that's the main character of the series they're adapting it from? No. So but my curiosity is like, are they going to keep him hidden that he's still alive until later? How's that going to work? So we're going to go back to Adam. And then we still have Epsilon. Epsilon getting a little bit pissed. I'm here for it. Miyano Mamoru can play a good pissed off character, so I'm ready to see what Miyano Mamoru wants to do with that voice. And like, here's the thing about Miyano Mamoru. He does not just voice just a character, just a little throwaway character. Nah, bitch. He is going to voice a character that's going to get some stuff out of him, so I'm excited to see where that goes. And then we have Hercules, who is still there with Dr. Hoffman, who is Gesic's mechanic, right? And Gesic is there as well. And so the 3 of them are left so far that we know, unless Adam is okay. But then we have Iran. So Iran is kind of like MIA as well in this. Iran doesn't seem to have made from Dr. Tenma. Iran is his sister, but she doesn't seem to be made from Dr. Tenma, so I wonder if she is the one doctor's, Ochanomizu's creation. I wonder if she's Ochan. Was it Ochan Omizu? If she's his creation. We don't know for sure. There was some weird, freaky stuff in here, and I'm going to be posing a lot of theories. Again, I don't know the original Astro Boy story. I just know it by proxy from seeing images and stuff from it. I don't want to know the full Astro Boy story yet. I feel like when we get to episode 8 of Pluto, I'm going to be researching it for the discussion leading into it. So we're going to touch base with that at that point when we get there. But, okay. Ochan Omizu is so trusting and just so nonchalant. Like, I give him kudos for having big balls in this situation, but I was like, dude, the people that are supporting robots' rights and are possibly the mechanics and doctors for the robots that have created them are dying left and right, and you're just like, oh, YOLO, I know who's going to target me. I'm like, you are so unsuspecting, dude. Yujiro died. Because of you. Oh my god. Yeah. Yujiro died because of your folly. Dude, take responsibility for the robot death that you caused. I feel bad for Yujiro. The moment he was like, oh, you're gonna go far with that name, I was like, bitch, you just sentenced him to a death sentence? What are you doing? But the whole idea of the dog, the little dog robot being used as bait, the moment he picked it up, I was like, that seems really sketch. And I was with Yujiro the whole time. Yujiro was like, do you need to take that random stray dog back to your house? Do you need to be doing this? Do you need to fix it? Should we do a full body scan of these people invading your house? I'd be a little less trusting if I were you. And Yujiro died because Ochan Omizu was just like, oh, no, it's fine. Nobody's gonna bother me. And I'm like, poor robot. But yeah, we're going to talk about the idea, though, of him bringing it back there. He's the Ministry of Science. We have definitely... Ochan Omizu has a chip on his shoulder because he is the successor to Dr. Tenma, who has, like, the most Kuwabara pompadour ever. He looks like a Dr. Space dandy. He's got, like, the biggest pompadour, and it's, like, going gray in the back. Yes. But I feel like with Ochan Omizu, there's a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because Dr. Tenma is said to be a perfect brain, like a savant, an amazing genius. Is he even possibly a robot? Who knows? Or he's just a really, really, really Einstein-level intelligence individual. And for Ochan Omizu to take over for him, there's a lot of pressure because he's the Ministry of Science. He has to prove his worth. And I think that it's partially that, but it's also the idea that he prides himself on being diligent and getting the job done and working hard to create and fix these robots. And he takes pride in it. It's connected to his self-worth. And so him repairing the robot is really important to him. And also, they talk about how the robot is outdated. I really felt when he was trying to find the parts and he couldn't find the parts to fix the robot, and it was really frustrating him. Like, the robot had been discontinued, and he was trying to find the parts, and they're like, oh, we don't make those anymore. And I get that. There's stuff, like, whether it's been working on a car that my dad has tried to find parts for, and they just don't exist anymore, or if it's me trying to find, like, we can probably all relate in some way, shape, or form to trying to find, like, a piece of lost media, and it just doesn't exist anymore, and so it's kind of like a scavenger hunt to try to find it. But with Ochan Omizu, it almost seems like he was being reminded that he's kind of outdated, that he's only mortal, and that he's eventually going to be discontinued. And it's kind of like him working on this ancient, by technology standards, robot dog was sort of reminding him of his own mortality and how newer, fresher minds are going to constantly be replacing him as time moves on and as science develops. So it seemed like a constant reminder of that as well. And in the meantime, this one guy gets on the teleprompter and he's like, oh, we need more robots, the Ministry of Defense. He's like, our next committee meeting is we need an answer. And it's like, they want to send more troops to the Kingdom of Persia. And Ochan Omizu's like, no more killing each other. I'm not going to approve sending any more robots to Persia. So they have the idea that they want to send more robots to Persia, and he is against this. honestly, what's fascinating is I think that's literally the only reason he's still alive is because Abula seems to be like completely against them having robots in Persia. We get a little bit of Abula's backstory in this, and he seems to be against it. So Goji just comes up and threatens him, but Goji just wants, all Goji wants is for Adam to show up to fight Pluto. That's literally all that Goji wants. So we have all these other players. We have Abula over here. I'm going to put Abula here. We have Abula that hates the war, but he is also kind of in charge of Pluto, who is destroying the robots that were involved with Persia, which were all of these robots. So it makes sense now why Abula is like wanting Pluto to destroy the Seven, because he's like, you all were involved in the fact-finding mission, so were your doctors that created you, and they led to this war, and because of this war, I lost my wife and children. The child turning into like robot parts was just so creepy, and it's like, ugh. And then, of course, that would be enough incentive for him to feel justified to go after them. I think it's interesting though, because we have Hercules and Abula now who are robotic and robots, but they also feel hatred and anger. And we talk about Abula having that same anger as well, which Dr. Timma said was like the advancement and growth of robotic brains. Sure. Okay. So we tie in that in there. But also we have on the side of this, we have Goji, who is connected with Pluto, although he's kind of more a messenger. He's more of a messenger, and then those nasty-ass cockroaches taking his AI away. So, to me, it feels like Dr. Tenma has made several AI creations that have these different functionalities to them that he's been slowly trying to advance, and maybe Pluto is the most advanced version of that. Although the question is are Pluto and Gesick the same? Are they duplicated AI? Are Gesick and Pluto like twins? So we're going to put Pluto next to him, because Adam makes a statement later that suggests that they are connected, which is fascinating to me. But yeah, and then we have Bobby the dog, that grandson with Bobby the dog, and he has like the little visor on his head. He's like oh, what's his name? LaForge from Star Trek. He has a little visor on there. Yeah, Geordi. It's like, aw, it's super cute. We'll talk about that damn Twister. But yeah, Yujiro, just trying to look after him, right? And he tries to find the parts and it doesn't work. And he spends all night and he can't fix the robot. But Yujiro was right. The robot was just literally a tracker to get Goji to find out where Ochanomizu lives, to go track him down and have a meeting with him. Which, here's the thing. If you've not watched Monster, then you probably wouldn't have suspected this man at first. But if you have watched Monster, there's a character called Lipsky that this design is distinctly based off of. But also the way that he presents himself and the way that he looks is very classic Urasawa bad guy. Like, there's just no other way to say it. It's Urasawa bad guy design, especially when his eyes get kind of deranged. And the moment he kept talking, I was like, oh no, red flag, red flag, red flag, not good. But Goji, interesting. And he keeps talking about how sad were you during the war. And God, he looks so demented. And he's like, oh, you think I fear for my life? He's like, I'm not calling Adam here to fight, and there's nothing you can do about it. It makes sense now that they spent a good portion of the early part of this episode building up how Ochanomizu doesn't care for his own safety and how nonchalant he is about that, and he's kind of fearless. I really like the contrast of Ochanomizu and Adolf, who is a complete coward, and just kind of contrasting those characters, because Ochanomizu, like, his fearlessness saves him in this moment, right? And it temporarily saves Adam until Iran gets involved, which we'll talk about. He's like, genius is an exaggeration, but I made a robot that can generate tornadoes. Okay, so the robot that generates tornadoes, a robot that murders with absolute impunity. So Goji is not only the messenger, but he created robots in the Persian War. in Persia, and specifically one that creates tornadoes that can use to hide Pluto, right? The thing that's interesting to me is at this point the connection between Abula and Goji. Because on the surface, it would seem like Abula and Goji are working together because they're both tied to Pluto. But are they two different things? Because the Pluto that came out of the bog was one robot, but then the robot and the tornado, are they the one and the same? Like, it would make sense, I guess, for Goji and Abula to be working together, and Pluto is like their answer to the Persian casualties. Like, Goji made robots during the Persian War to combat the ones that came from the other forces, and Abula is just supporting that because he's pissed off at the outside, like, Europol getting involved and killing his family. So that part makes sense. But then on the other side, it's like, a part of me would think that maybe Goji and Abula would be against each other because Goji was making robots for the Persian War, which Abula seems to despise. So we don't have the full context of it yet, but their connection together is really interesting. And if they kind of were just like, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's why they're working together, then I guess that would kind of make sense. But it's so creepy. There's a lot of really creepy moments in this episode. And then he's like, even when they're almost us, robots will never kill humans. And he's like, what makes you cling to that view? And he's like, I don't know if you're just an optimist or a raging hypocrite. And I'm like, can it be both? I feel like Ochan Amizu is both. He's kind of hypocritical, but he's also like a raging optimist. Yeah. And he's like, let's put it to the test. And he's like, other robots that were intended for use as weapons of mass destruction. And he's like, what does he say there? Goji goes, he goes, that's why we sent over the fact-finding mission. He's like, and what did they find out? And he's like, well, we didn't find out anything, but y'all seem to maybe have covered up something. He's like, well, you don't have any proof. So it just like goes around in circles. And then Goji tries to use like the grandson as liability, being like, we're going to cause a tornado and kill your family if you don't send Adam to go fight him. And Ochan Amizu is like, bitch, are you for real? So then the police show up and Adam is like on his way there and gets the call in. And I like that the one guy, Goji, is like a frog. So he's possibly so he's a robot. Yeah, we established that Goji is a robot. Or is at least AI. Kind of like we feel Abula is. It is so crazy to me that the robots and humanity are not that far apart. And that's kind of the point they're making in this episode, being like, is it a good thing that robots and humanity are not that far apart? Because robots can literally destroy a lot easier than humans can. Do we want them to have emotions humanity does? That seems like a bad idea, to give them like error. And that's kind of what the emotions are phrased as. They're phrased as errors. If you can't be objective, you can't be denotative if you have connotation. Connotation is the emotional response, denotation is the objective response. You can't be objective with emotions. It's not possible, right? The moment that emotions get involved, that's why it says you're emotionally compromised. It's just like once emotions start to play a part in it, you are going to be biased in some way, shape, or form. And I like that emotionality is called an error. And they're like, do you want your robots to have errors? Personally, no. But it's like the sentimentality has been like, oh yeah, we want these robots to feel like people and do all this. And I'm like, but then what if they get pissed off? Then you have a situation like this where Abula and Goji, who seem to be robots themselves, are creating weapons of mass destruction to do things that they cannot do. And it's like, oh, this is a problem. And I feel like Abula and Goji are both connected to Dr. Tenma, who seems pretty apt on advancing modern AI to have like this stellar brain. And it is not lost on me how scary this all is, because we're dealing with modern AI starting right now. So no worries. Hee hee. But yeah, the doctor tells Adam to not go over where Pluto is, because that seems like a bad idea. The cockroaches taking the chip away is terrifying. The little robot cockroaches, it's so creepy. And yeah, they all take, I wonder if I want to get close up of the like chip that has on there. Yeah, it's just literally the cartridge with the AI in it. But Iran, of course. Here's my thing. First of all, The whole thing with the tornado. The whole thing with the tornado. And the like Helen Huntism of it all. Like Bobby and everything. If you've ever watched the American movie Twister, that's all I could think back during this scene. I was like, how that grandchild and the daughter and Bobby were not killed during that tornado is like beyond me, but whatever. We'll take anime logic, say that they somehow survived it. It's fine. I'm okay with that. Whatever. But here's my thing. I thought when Iran was going over to the house, I really had expected Iran to have a scene with Pluto. I was really expecting that. I was expecting Iran and Pluto to have a confrontation because she saw his previous body in the episode prior. I thought that was going to be a thing. It did not end up being a thing. So I don't know with Iran, if Adam is actually dead, which I don't think he is, which I could be wrong. I wonder if she is going to eventually confront Pluto and be like, you killed my brother. Like, why did you do that? What's going on? I'm very curious about that. I'm very curious to know if she's going to have a confrontation with him later because she didn't have it now. If we're saving that, what that's going to look like. I really honestly thought Iran was going to die. I thought Iran was going to get killed in this episode, and that was going to prompt Adam to take action. I thought that was going to be a thing, right? Because Adam very much has a very squeaky clean personality. He comes across as like the perfect child, which maybe that's why Tenma doesn't like him, because he's like, no, he's too squeaky clean. He's not real because he doesn't feel real emotions. He's just imitating children. He's imitating those around him. So I'm wondering if Adam is not dead and he gets revived and then Iran gets killed somehow, if that's going to spark anger in him, what that's going to do. The fact that Tenma said that Adam is a failure, I feel that's going to have some comeuppance and callback in this series. So we're only halfway through the series, and I'm just like, what is going on? Right? So then we have this very weird flashback with Abula. It is not given a time frame. It is not given a like 4 years ago or anything like that. It just happens. This little tiny flashback or moment happens, and that's all we get. And it's Abula like coughing and asking where his wife and kids are, and we see him find his wife and kids, and they're all dead. Granted, it's not as gory as it could be. I was expecting it to be a lot gorier. It's not. But man, him picking up his one kid and it just them falling apart. Oh my God. Absolutely terrifying. Nope. But then we have, that has to be a flashback because it cuts to Abula. But we don't know how long ago this was. And he says, where is Pluto? And he's like, his transmission cut off, so his system overloaded. And then he says, good. Then every part of him has been taken over by righteous hatred. Okay. And then that's where we're at. So the thing with Pluto is that he is controlled. He is controlled by hatred and uses it as power. And maybe Abula and Goji cannot act on those emotions, so they found a way. I feel like Pluto is exactly what Dr. Tenma was wanting, was a robot that could harness the power of hatred to use as a weapon, which is terrifying. But I feel like that's exactly what's happened. But poor Bobby, I was worried about that dog. I was worried about Iran. Both of them end up being fine. But then, of course, they're like the culprit who's been targeting the world's most advanced robots and murdering those human beings. The mastermind is Goji. So they're blaming Goji, who is responsible for the Persian War escalating. And they're like, Gesic's on the case, and we have to get there. I don't know if Goji is the sole one responsible. That seems like it's putting too much responsibility for all of this on one person. I feel like Goji's just a part of it. Goji's just a piece of the puzzle. Kind of like Adolf's a part of an organization that hates robots. I feel like Goji's not the only one responsible in all this. So then, okay, Adam starts to sense like there's the electromagnetic waves getting with Iran, and when he shows up, And then there's this monster, and we see the flash to the mural, right? And what was this? There was a flash to the mural. I want to go back and try to like pause on some parts of this because it's like very quick, the flashes. And he's like, your signal is messing up. And of course, Bobby's freaking out by everything that's going on. So yeah, then they get into the eye of the storm, and Adam's trying to hear her. And then there's this burst of electromagnetic waves, which I wonder is like the photon energy, like what we're talking about with Epsilon. And what's staggering the communication, we see we saw the mural, and then there was like the eyes flashing, and there was like a flash of blood on the ground. So we have the mural, we have the blood, okay, like a puddle of blood. And then like, Adam's like, what am I sensing? What's getting scrambled up in here? And then we have the man that is looking for the bodies. He's like, 500 Zeus a body. What do you say? Like, what is that going on? And then Adam's like, Gesick. Like he's like, it's Gesick's memories. Okay. So Gesick's memories are somewhat in there. Interesting. My thing is, I wonder if Gesick, and I'm going to throw around a bunch of theories until we get explanation from the actual episodes themselves. I'm wondering if maybe Dr. Tenma, if they copied Gesick's hard drive, if they copied Gesick's memories or cloned them, and that's what's like fueling Pluto. Maybe. And he's like, I'm almost there. And she tells him to turn around. But of course he doesn't listen. Why would they listen? Why? And he flies straight into the storm. It's like, Adam, why would you do that? You're not a fighter. You clearly know that. I know you want to save Iran, but seriously, I don't think she was in trouble. And she's like, run away. Now, this monstrosity is huge. It's like Bora. It's the big giant thing. And he goes through the storm and sees this giant ass monster, which is huge. It almost seems like Bora and Pluto are two different entities, but I don't think that they are. I think Bora is just what Pluto becomes. And yeah, them looking up and seeing from the eye of the storm this giant ass monster. That's terrifying. Nope, it's like Donnie Darko. It's creepy. And like, what is that thing? And here's the thing. Adam goes towards it to like fly to it to attack it. And he goes towards its mouth. But here's what ends up happening. So I wanted to get this. He gets almost like magnetized towards it. And he goes towards its eye. And like goes inside the eye of the storm. Like the storm, the monster... It's like Pluto's at the center of it, and it's like Pluto expands and becomes all this electromagnetic waves that forms this bigger structure. So I think it could be that Pluto's body is able to dismantle itself and become electromagnetic waves. And so it looks bigger than it actually is. And so when Adam goes through the eye, like literally into the eye of the storm, he like connects with it. And then the monster like clamps down its mouth on him and just fries him from the inside, like fries his magnetic, like fries all his circuits. I don't know. It seemed like it fried his circuits. And supposedly he's dead. I mean, I won't be surprised if they told me he was dead and it fried his circuits. Okay. And maybe North Number 2 and Mont Blanc exploded because their bodies couldn't handle it. They were older models, and Adam's a much more advanced model. But supposedly the moment that he dies is when Gesick has this big explosion in his dream. So maybe Adam is dead. I just am like, what? 4 episodes in? What? And that's when Gesick screams and has the nightmare. The thing that gets me is Adolf was waiting to fire. I kept thinking Adolf was going to kill Helena. I kept thinking that that was going to be the case. I kept thinking Helena was going to die at the hands of Adolf, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening. Adolf is a fascinating character because he is a coward. And so the fact that he's part of like a fascist cult is a problem, but I feel like it's interesting that I'm glad we get to see him and Gesick have these conversations and are walking through, and we end the episode with him being like, you killed my brother. And so we're gonna have to go back to that. So that part's gonna be interesting to see how we work through it. But here's the thing. We have Adolf, who wants to kill Gesick. But the problem is that the cult that he's a part of, they want to kill him because he's right now a threat here's the thing. There are multiple players at work trying to get Adolf to do things because the cult does not want to kill Gesick because they want to keep him alive. They want public opinion to be against Gesick and the robot. So if Adolf kills Gesick, they're like, if Adolf kills Gesick and the public finds out about it, they're going to just find out about the organization possibly, and it's going to make them look bad, and it's going to make the robots look sympathetic. And the last thing they don't want the robots to look sympathetic. So like, we don't want Adolf to kill him, so let's get rid of him before that happens. But then it all gets thwarted. Meanwhile, there is another party is telling Adolf to kill Gesick or his family's in danger. So is the other party the cult and they've changed their mind? Or is the other party telling Adolf to kill Gesick to save his family having to do with Abula and Goji and all them? And trying to frame them like Goji was trying to frame Ochana-Mizu. Maybe. We don't know. But like, Adolf gets so pissed off because everybody's threatening his family, and that's the last thing he wants. Like, his trigger is people threatening his family, that he kills that sanitation robot, and that triggers Gesick into getting mad, and he's like, aha, you got mad and threatened me, and now my brother who is anti-robot, you killed him because he threatened you. And so it's like, gotta find out what's gonna happen. So, okay, so the doctors that we have on here, Gesick tries to go to Hoffman to talk about the dreams he's been having. I love the idea that he says that they put their bad memories into trash bins, that you just put it in the trash bin if you don't want it. And Hoffman's like, yeah, humans, they put unpleasant thoughts into emotional trash bins, and we try to forget it, but it doesn't always work out, whereas robots can very neatly and discreetly get a memory out of there, right? So we know with Gesick that Hoffman is tied to him and he is safe. Hercules and Brando, I don't remember who their doctors were. We know that the Howard doctor was Epsilon's and he's dead. We're going to talk about the others here a little bit, which is, the group that is against the 7 robots, they're trying to get rid of the doctors because, like the one military guy told Hoffman, he's like, he's doing maintenance on Gesick. He's the one that knows how to do maintenance, so that's why they keep him alive. If this group kills the doctors that do maintenance on our 7 robots, what happens if they get, out of whack or need repairs? Nobody's going to be able to do that. They started this episode off talking about an overhaul and certain things being discontinued, and Ochana-Mizu points out that not everything can be reworked and keep on functioning because it gets outdated. Well, if their doctors taking care of them and get outdated, then yeah, that's a problem. So interesting. But yeah, and I get that Hoffman is a little bit, he's worried because he knows that behind the scenes stuff's happening and there's not much that he can do about it. It's like, I want Hoffman to stay alive, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. Meanwhile, some people try to kill Adolf and he freaks out about it. Helena and Gesick are about to go on their trip, but then they find out that Adam's been killed. And Gesick's like, I thought I had a nightmare, but what if it was a message? And he wants to go back. And he's like, unlock the trash bin and show the contents. Helena's a saint because she has to deal with all this going on. So then we have the scene. I want to go back to it. Where we see Adam. We see the monster, Pluto, that's looking through the eye of the storm. And then we see Gesick's eye too, right? And then there's Adam, and he says, listen, Gesick. And he says, what does he say there? He says, listen to me. He's like, you and Pluto are the same. Which is so creepy. And Gesick's like, what? Why am I the same as Pluto? What are we talking about? Are they both the perfect robot? Are they both engineered to be the perfect robot that can feel emotions? Is that what he's saying? They're not like clones of each other, and they're not brothers, they're not things like that, but they're both robots that can feel emotions, and the government's just wiped part of Gesic's memory out so he doesn't realize that. And he says, "Are you the one who murdered me, detective?" Oh my god, that's so chilling. Oh my god. Like, what the fudge? And then Gesic's like, nope. And then we see the one Brow, the robot Hannibal Lecter. And then we see 500 Zeus a body. What do you say? That one old man with the 500 Zeus, I want to know what it's talking about. But then Gesic collapses. Poor Helena. She's like, what the fudge? Meanwhile, in his mind, there's something else playing where we see a train horn wailing. Okay. And something's destroyed. And they're like, oh my god, someone call an ambulance. And it's like a car that was hit. And then we see Tenma standing over a body. So we have a car hit. We have Tenma. After that, looking over the body. And he says, Tobio. And then he's like crying like it was his son, right? And then we have this crackling. And it's very Frankenstein. Where he's like, okay. And he's like, yes, that's a good boy. And then we have like, try and come and walk to me. Which was Tenma asking for Adam to walk towards him. And so he called Adam Tobio, right? So he called him Tobio. So Tenma, like, clearly, like, his son died, Tobio, and so he recreated him. I don't know Astro Boy, but I'm assuming that's the origin. He made his son into Astro Boy, into a robot, to try to replace his son. But maybe in that regard, that's why he told Ochanomizu that Adam was a failure, because his son would have recognized him as his father and had emotions like love and hatred and whatever, but Adam doesn't feel those, so Tenma doesn't feel like he connects with his son. Maybe he doesn't feel like that connection is there. Because, yeah, he starts walking back towards him. And then we see Helena, where she's like, look, he did it. And then she's like, yeah, he's actually walking Gesic. But then Adam falters and falls and then starts to like completely come unraveled. And like the hair falls out. It's very Akira. And starts to completely come apart. And underneath is just the robot. Huh. And then the robot starts, its eyes fill up with tears. And then, do you know who was here, my infant child? And we go back to that scene from the war. Huh. And then we see an image of Gesic punching the mural that Pluto made. We see him like shirtless, which, good on you, show. I have such a fictional crush on Gesic. It's not even funny. He checks off so many boxes. And I was like, oh no, I have a fictional crush on Gesic, and you give me these shots of him shirtless? Yes, please. But yeah, him smashing the mural of like peace and creation and saying his AI keeps malfunctioning. Okay. Artificial neuron overload. There's no virus. Yep. Scan his memory and prepare to reformat on my command. Okay. So, there's a tie to Gesic's anger. There's a tie to Gesic's anger. And possibly to him being a father. And possibly to his memory with no virus. Kind of like Brow. Okay. There is clearly a connection between Adam and Gesic, Pluto, and Brow. There's a connection between all of them. We just don't know entirely what the connection is fully. Like all the puzzle is like scattered on the floor, and you see all the pieces, and you're like, okay, I know these all fit together. How do they fit together? And that the show hasn't given us that yet, but it's telling us that Gesic and Pluto are similar in that they have emotion, but it's sort of a situation where Gesik's emotions are being repressed and they're constantly being edited to where he doesn't realize that he has these emotions that he can tap into and use. And meanwhile, Pluto, they're just like letting him be uninhibited. They're like, yeah, no, you're great. Do whatever you want. Go for it. So, I'm so curious. I'm so curious. Poor Helena, though. She's a great wife, right? So then the police are like, the fact that Adolf had access to an anti-robot like bazooka, they're like, he has access to weaponry that's highly illegal. So clearly there's something going on. They think that Adolf's being set up, but they're like, until everybody's just using Adolf at this point. Adolf is being used by the cult. He's potentially being used by Goji and Abula. And then Adolf's also being used by the police because they're like, well, we don't need to, like, we just need to put Gesik in charge of watching him, and maybe the people will come out of the woodwork to try to get him. So we just need to do that. So there is a part of me that feels a little bit for Adolf because it's like, he didn't ask for this, but then it's also kind of like, you kind of asked for this. But I will say, the voicemail of the guy that gets on there saying like, how creepy would it be if you were sitting there and somebody gets on this disturbed like voicemail and they're like, hey, you're being targeted and they're going to try to kill you, just letting you know, FYI. And then 2 minutes later, it's like, hey, buddy, old pal, what are you doing? And it's like, oh no. So those two back-to-back voicemails were so creepy. I love that's something too. The animation of this series, like the coloring and shading, it's such an upgrade with Urasawa's art. I love it. And the scene where he is running to try to get away from someone killing him, and it's Gesik that shows up, and it's all in these blue tones, these like blues and grays. Oh, that was so well done. That was probably one of my favorite animated sequences of the episode because it's just so good. And of course he'd be freaked out because it's the guy that supposedly killed his brother right in front of him in his house. I will say, his kid is like bound and determined that Gesik is the coolest thing ever. I am kind of happy that Adolf, despite being in this like fascist cult, hasn't tried to like brainwash his kid, you know, because his kid talks about like wanting robot butlers and things like that. That's interesting because a lot of times when you see like shows based in World War II or something, and you see them, it's like the kids are kind of indoctrinated into the same beliefs as their parents. But here it's not quite the case. So that's interesting to me that Urasawa is like keeping those separated. But yeah, I like that Gesik's just honest with him. He's like, look, sorry that you hate robots, but I'm your bodyguard, but I got a job to do, so let's do it. And he checks it for explosives and everything, and that's when they find the footage. He's like, oh, well, innocent people don't get their cars blown up. He's like, I'm being targeted. And he shows him the secret files from the post-war reconstruction money is the easiest out there. And so he tries to like brag at this point where he talks about like the one doctor that made Epsilon being targeted. And he's like, aren't you going to mourn for your friend? And Gesik's like, well, no, I've got a job to do right now. Like, no. I like that Adolf keeps trying to get Gesik to have an emotional response because he thinks that he is capable of that since he killed his brother. But it's not working, and he's like, I've got a job to do. This isn't working for me. And honestly, I've watched enough like crime thrillers and detective shows where it's like they try to get under the detective's skin, and they're like, I got a job to do. No. And it takes Gesik watching him kill a robot for him to have the reaction. But in the moment, he doesn't have it. And then Adolf's trying to prove, he's like, well, let me show you the information that I have. Let me just show you about this prison where these people were in solitary confinement, but they were altering the footage. And Gesik's like, wait, what are we doing? I like that Gesik's like, you've been sitting on all this information? No wonder these people would try to kill you. You've got info that could put them behind bars. And then we see Darius, the leader of Persia, and he keeps saying, what does he keep saying there? He says, Lanky, Tazaki, Newton, Howard. So Lanky, Tazaki, Newton, Howard, they're all like doctors that were responsible for some of the robots. And he like pushes Adolf out of the way. And he's like, well, what do you think? He's mumbling names to himself like it's a mantra. Or maybe more like a curse since they're names of people who've been killed. I like that Gesik's like, you've had this critical evidence that could point to like the ones responsible and you've just been sitting on it. Like you didn't even know what it was. And that's kind of interesting that Adolf is just kind of like this bumbling idiot that is a coward. And he's been just kind of involved, like taken into the involvement with this. He's like, Reinhardt, Lonke. Yep. And then he's like, what were you thinking? Why did you keep this to yourself? The fact that Gesick gets so emotional in this one scene is pretty telling, that he gets so emotional being like, you've had this info. This is really important. He's like, it's just some crazy inmate. And he's like, no, it's not just a crazy inmate. It's the leader of Persia. But yeah, good on Epsilon for getting Hoffman out of there. Good job. I am a little bit worried about Ochanomizu because he's being targeted as well. I'm worried about him, but I'm glad that Hoffman got out of there. And I love that Epsilon's like, I'm pissed. And him being pissed is just him being like, oh, I'm mad. I'm fuming. It's like, I'm so excited because Miyano Mamoru hasn't yet to let me down. I don't want Epsilon and Hercules to die, but I think they're going to. So yeah, and then Gesick's like, okay, with this prison footage coming to light, we're gonna go. And then that's when the bomb comes to the window. Now, I think it says something that a smart bomb is stopped by Gesick with his two bare hands, and they aren't even so much as singed. I think that says a lot, because I was expecting it to be like a Tropic Thunder moment where you'd look at Gesick's hands and they're just gone. They're just like wires and everything sticking out and the hands blew up. No, they're perfectly fine. That's insane. Gesick is a lot stronger than he appears. And we're just getting little snippets of that, kind of little crumbs dropped throughout this. I'm like, oh, okay. But now the cult organization, they have their own anti-robot bazooka, so I'm a little bit worried about that. I don't think Helena's safe. I think that Helena's gonna die. I think that the last straw, it's gonna be like the movie Seven. I think that the last straw is gonna be like Helena getting hurt. Because if anything's gonna throw Gesick over the edge and show how human he is, like Adolf's whole thing has been his family. Like his family being in danger, wanting to make sure his family is safe, all of this. I feel like Gesick is secretly the same way, and I think that it's going to take Gesick's wife being destroyed for him to snap. And I don't want that for her, but I think that's where it's headed. But the question is going to be who kills her. So yeah, so they find Professor Hoffman is over hanging out with Epsilon and Hercules, and I like that Urasawa draws such different body types in this series. Like, not all the robots look the same. You have Adam, who's a kid. You have Mont Blanc, who's like this big, giant robot. Kind of like Baymax from Big Hero 6. You have North number 2, who's just this tall, skinny robot who is very, very robotic, doesn't have a lot of human qualities to his appearance. And then you have, you know, Epsilon, who is very skinny, like kind of the like androgynous male body. And then you have Hercules and Brando and Gesick, who are kind of like just these big buff guys. So I really like that. We're just appealing to all ages, appealing to all masses, whatever type of body you like and are attracted to. We've got a robot that can do that for you. But yeah, I like that they talk about the Kimberly thing with the three professors. It's Hoffman and then Epsilon's and then Adams together. And he's like, we were trying to find a way to make the perfect robot brain, and it's the three of them working together. What happened once the three of you got together? And he's like, we were fully committed to our goal, and we put all of our cards on the table, and we laid our findings bare, but Tenma took it. When the time came, he refused to share any research. So basically, Tenma just took their research and ran, which, can you believe? What academic dishonesty, where you just took their research and was like, okay, thanks, bye, I'm not sharing any of my stuff. And I'm going to be very curious to see what ends up coming of this. He's like, the perfect robot brain. It will be capable of suffering, hatred, error. It cannot be avoided. He's like, he wouldn't reveal any particulars of his own body of work, but he absorbed mine at a glance. He had the perfect brain. And so then, what does he say there? As he's leaving, Give it up or something terrible will happen, though it might already be too late. So I'm really curious, right? Because it seems in that moment like Tenma was wanting them to stop with the research. He's like, stop trying to make a perfect AI brain. It's not going to go well. It's going to learn like hatred and suffering, and it's going to take it out on others, and that will spell disaster. So it seemed like Tenma wanted to stop all of this, but then Abula and Goji want to continue it. So I'm curious if Abula and Goji got a hold of Tenma's research, or what that means, how that goes. Are we going to see Tenma again? Was Tenma the Japanese doctor that saw Duncan back in episode 1? I don't know. We might find out, but he says, I've been put in charge of the Ministry of Science as your successor, Chanamizu. Computerized brains are not something a man creates. When pushed, they grow. The sting of frustration, the profound sorrow, they push a robot's brain to improve. And he's like, all robots are equipped with a control device that dampens certain extreme emotions. He's like, having not known those deep emotions, their brains are incomplete. He's like, but you say that they're not created, but you created Adam yourself. He's like, he's a masterpiece. And he's like, no, he's a failure. So yeah, I don't exactly know Tenma's game. Tenma seems like he doesn't want them to continue their AI to try to perfect it, because he doesn't think that's possible without it, like, you know, you're playing God, it's not going to end well. But then we don't know. Tenma is mysterious. And I'm like, what is his end goal? I just don't understand. He's like an utter failure. And yeah, so Tenma's taking himself conveniently off the map. Of course he has. Okay. No one had the slightest inkling where he could be. And he's like, something terrible is going to happen. I wonder if he pulled it off. If he made his perfect robot. I think that he did. And it's probably Gesick and Pluto, right? Interesting. Or it could be that Gesick is the perfect robot, and Abula, like when the military tried to erase part of Gesick's memories and part of Gesick's hard drive to keep him from maybe going insane and killing more people, maybe when they tried to erase part of it, could it be that Goji and Abula got a hold of it, and that's what they've used to create Pluto? Could they have taken all of the hatred and bad memories from Gesick and took that file and made it into just literally what Pluto is? So is Pluto possibly all of the evil and hatred from Gesick that was created by the AI, and it's just become Pluto itself? I don't know. But anyway, so Adolf reasonably wants to know, like, where his family is. And the one guy's like, oh, they're under protection. They're perfectly fine. And then they talk about how they go on and say that they talk about, like, the past history. They're like, the members of the Bora fact-finding mission in Persia before the war, which was chilling, given that 3 members were murdered as of late. So basically, these fact-finding mission people are partially responsible for the acceleration of the conflict in Persia. And Adolf's like, well, so there's all these factors that that the public doesn't know about? And it's like, yeah. And like, Darius would have a compelling reason to want revenge upon the people involved in the mission. And they're like, yeah, the kingdom of Persia was plunged into war as soon as their team left the country. But they never found any robots of mass destruction. And there had been reason to invade, right? Yeah, so, yeah, we talked about that whole U.S. invasion of Iraq. All I could think about during this scene was, I was like, oh, you mean a country was attacked even though there was supposedly nothing found? What? I don't know what you were talking about. What? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. There's a lot of... The commentary is there. I mean, the commentary is there, right? It's all there. I'm not going to get into history lesson with y'all. If you want to go look up the invasion of Iraq, you are welcome to do so. But the commentary is very on the nose. And I'm like, yep. I was like in junior high at the time, but I know what they're talking about. And so then he says, yeah, we're investigating the anti-robot organization, but we believe that they have reason to want to kill you. So just be careful about that. And so then, yeah, Adolf gets sick about it. And then, damn, that creepy robot that's just like, oh, unless you want your family to die alongside you, you're going to kill Gesick. Whoever's controlling that robot, we don't know. How they managed to get this one robot to show up at the one rest station where they ended up stopping at. Something seems to be able to control robots or take advantage of them from afar. So that's interesting. And then, yeah, Gesick shows up to see him attacking the robot, and he gets mad and tells him to stop. And he's like, yep, now you show your true colors. This is how you looked the day that you saw my brother. You're the one. You killed him. And Gesick's like, excuse me? Gesick's like, what are we talking about? What? A stinking robot. And Gesick's like, I didn't kill your brother. What's going on? My memories? And then we come back to Ochana-Mizu. Him thinking about his conversation with Tenma. How can you call him a failure? He's a masterpiece. The very pinnacle of scientific achievement. Which, yeah, in terms of being a robot that acts like a human on the surface, sure. But then he says, you've made it clear you don't understand a thing about computerized brains. Frustration, intense hatred. That seething hatred that could lead someone to murder under the right conditions. Those are what robotic brains need to grow. I'm like, oh, well, that's a problem. So basically he's saying Adam is a failure because Adam is a kind robot that doesn't have that intense hatred or frustration. He's very logical and doesn't have that emotion. But Gesick does, perhaps. And he's like, they need that to grow. And he's like, oh, you're wrong, Dr. Tenma. You may be a genius, but you're gravely mistaken. He's like, a brain capable of error. That's what it means to achieve perfection. And that is what will finally give birth. Oof. To the greatest robot the world has ever seen. A robot that's basically like a human. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I like that Ochana-Mizu and Tenma have these opposing views. And Ochana-Mizu has a very like rose-tinted kind of understanding of robotic perfection. I normally think of what Ochana-Mizu thinks of when you think of perfection with a robot. It's like something that seems like a human, but is elevated beyond humanity, right? Where it's objective, it's, you know, able to compute logically and think and interact with people, but not have the faults of humanity. But Tenma is saying, no, the faults of humanity are what make us perfect. And I'm like, now you're getting into some discussion. Now we're getting into some things. Okay. This episode was a lot. This episode was so much. So much. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait until the comments to get to episode 5. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how my schedule goes. But I am so fascinated, so ready to see where this goes. We'll see where my schedule goes. Maybe I'll get to see episode 3's, episode 4's comments, but I don't know. If not, then I'll get to them in episode 6. Don't worry. But I'm super excited, y'all. Holy cow. This episode, like, the first 3 episodes were good, and I really liked them. This one I was like, oh, yes, what are we getting into? We're getting into lots of things. I can't wait to see where it goes to next. So keep me on my toes. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Pluto. I can't wait to hear your comments down below. Please no spoilers, hints, or clues, but we can talk about this episode for sure and the stuff being talked about within it. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Pluto. Bye!